Hi, this is Rochelle with Live in Vibrancy. And I was asked a question in my group, and I really wanted to make a video about it because it brings up some really relevant points. And uh, Basically, the asker's therapist touched on the idea of magical thinking. And the question, without really giving a lot of details, is about the difference between manifesting and magical thinking. And so I thought this was challenging because at its core, it's sort of like comparing an apple and broccoli. Both are food, they have a few other similarities, but the similarities begin to fall away. So unless the therapist is trained as a transcendental therapist or studied like the work from the Heart Math Institute or essentially has like some sort of deep-seated background in spirituality or has followed the work of Klosner, Aspect, and Zeilinger, I'm sure I'm slaughtering his name, who won the Nobel Prize for proving that the universe isn't locally real, not that the universe doesn't exist, but that it isn't locally real, then there's a pretty high risk of incongruency between the points of view. And so it's not a knock against therapists in any way. I just want that to be clear. I'm just trying to set the expectation because this question has a lot of angles, and there's a lot of risk that some of this information could be misconstrued. Manifesting for me is a deeply spiritual practice. It's a connection to something greater than myself, and that tends to be the angle that I come at it from. But in the daytime, I write procedures, and then at night, I give people tools to invite miracles into their lives. So I understand the struggle is real. How do we come at this and not feel like, oh my goodness, am I losing the plot? So I always like to say that manifesting, it's not a doing process. And often when we get into this sense of it being a doing process, this is where we're going to run into a lot of challenges, because while the doings may work in the beginning, there is a point at which they seem to lose their effectiveness. Kind of just like anything else when you're really working with non-concrete concepts. Anyway, so it's not really about like forcing visualizations or endlessly affirming or, dancing naked by the moonlight while patting your head and rubbing your stomach or whatever your thing is. And those can be really useful when your energy is in line because we actually have a subconscious association to symbols. And so this is essentially, these things are all symbolic, therefore they're a placebo. But in the end, it's energy first. Everything is energy at its first principle. So this is not an opinion of mine. Just the way that I come to work to the energy is an opinion. Energy, everything is energy. Everything is a wave. Everything is a particle. Atoms are essentially empty space. So you are, in essence, really empty space. And I'm going to really try not to get super meta with this. So anyway, energy, whether dense or expansive, is going to manifest an experience into your life. It does not care. It matches the experience to the energy. It's like soil. It's going to grow both seeds or flowers, whichever you're giving the most attention to. Manifesting, it's not a doing process, it's a feeling process. Feeling in the way that we experience reality, right? So you can see something, but it's the sensation that you feel about what you've seen, and that's how you experience what you've seen, more so than just the seeing itself. So for example, imagine you look out onto the horizon. Maybe your heart swells, your eyes dilate, your breathing slows and deepens, or perhaps a flood of memories arise. Or, all of the above. It's your inner experience of it, and that's what gives it the reality and the meaning. The associations you have with it, the psychological responses, and like the sensations in your body. And your individual senses are also just making up the experience because sensory experiences aren't objectively the same for everyone. What's red to one person is more kind of like a brownish green to another. We see this in people that have certain variations of color blindness. And that's not even the only kind of color blindness there is. And so essentially, What's hot to one person isn't hot to another. And so we measure reality from our own objective position. So now you create your experience of reality at many levels. And this is where new research in quantum fundamentals could take us down a mind-warping path. But we're going to stick to this path. And just note that without those sensory experiences and meanings, nothing really is what you experience as real. Now, when you intend to manifest something into your life, it's because you want to experience a feeling. And so we often think that we want to have something, but I mean, I could have $1 million, and if I can't ever take it out of like the box on my table, it's just a box of a bunch of pieces of paper. And so it's what I can do with that $1 million that makes me want it, right? So anyway, it would probably be more accurate to say that manifesting is a being process, because all these sensations, they essentially make up your experience of reality and essentially also of yourself. So from the spiritual perspective, this is the law of correspondence. As above, so below, as within, so without. Your reality is essentially an outward projection of your inner experience. And so you don't manifest what you want, you manifest who you are. And this is where it gets a little nuanced. Than just changing thoughts and getting rid of feelings, which is essentially some of the examples that this question cited, like ideas that I could have had what I wanted if I could just get rid of the feeling. And so it's not quite that. You never attract that which you want, but always that which you are. As a man is, so does he see. That which you feel yourself to be, you are, and you're given that which you are. So assume the feeling that would be yours were you already in possession of your wish, and your wish must be realized. And I promise you, this works the other way too. Assume the feeling that would be yours were you in possession of what you do not want, and your wish must be realized. I promise. I just did this. So you're constantly manifesting something in every moment because your beliefs, your perceptions, your feelings, they affect how you show up in the world. They affect what you believe is possible. They affect your experience of all of it. They also actually affect how you process your experience. And so the way you manifest is also really affected by the way your brain processes your reality. And that's not just like something you were born with. This is essentially something you tend to learn to do, or you were conditioned into doing from childhood. Some people actually are. I was not. This is a skill I developed. And again, that does not protect me from sometimes being wiped out by my own subconscious. It happens. And so it's a lot easier to focus on what you don't want, right? To feel the fear and the worry. It's part of your body's survival mechanism, because at one point in time, we had to run away from bears. And so this is essentially part of that mastering self. And it's like, whoops, I didn't that time. I'm going to have to moving forward. And at least, I can learn from that and take something away. You don't manifest your desires from a state of survival. No one ever did something great and then said, boy, I wish I'd spent more time worrying and feeling frozen in fear. Like, that just doesn't happen. So the results that we materialize in life show you that the thoughts and the feelings that run most predominantly in the background, actually, just outside the perimeter of your conscious awareness, also create. In fact, because those are 95% of what's going on, they're more likely to create, which brings us back to the importance of being conscious in your life and aware. And there's actually levels of awareness. You can be aware of something while analyzing it and not be present with it. And yeah, it's going to create. So anyway, the thing about, this is basically more or less when your background associations are sort of running the show, we could call this hypnotic rhythm. Napoleon Hill talked about this in, it's a book, and I will have to put it in the credits, the title. It's like Conversations with the Devil or something. I can't remember the title. I read it like a decade ago, but it's a very good book. Anyway, so it's basically once you're in hypnotic rhythm, it's almost impossible to objectively see yourself because you are essentially unconsciously focused on resisting what you fear, or you're unconsciously driven by something. And so after the fact, if you are able to dissect your results and play the movie of how you've been showing up backwards objectively, you're going to be able to see it. And so that's one of the ways that you can begin to dissect. Rather than personalizing your results and making it mean something about you, and this is what I mean when I say you can begin to change or train your mind to process how you see and experience things differently. And this also tends to require you to be able to process your emotions effectively. Because once you're no longer carrying like guilt or shame or self-judgment, because those things are going to taint the lens of how you see the experience. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, the ego projects your experience outwards to tell you that things are happening to you, and not that you're the creator of your results. But you're actually just experiencing yourself experience life. You are experiencing yourself experience the horizon, the food, the love from someone else. You are awareness, experiencing itself, having an experience. And now the ego is not bad, it's necessary. It's the way you essentially have established who you are and how safe you are in the world. It's a projected mask of your identity. You could say it's the Maya, it's this illusion of self. This is what it means if you've ever heard the concept, it's all a dream. As awareness, experiencing itself, experience life. If you want a different experience, you have to begin by experiencing it differently. And this is, again, where I go back to learning how to process your experience, your emotions, your thoughts, all of it differently. And it takes practice, I promise. Anyway, so admittedly, the greatest challenge of transmuting energy is essentially to be able to experience and experience differently. And so you actually see how teachings like Napoleon Hill again, he says there's the seed of something equal or greater in every misfortune, loss, or failure. And again, not verbatim, but you get the point. And so instead of seeing a failure and taking it personally, you now are beginning to mine, well, what can I learn from this? How can this propel me forward? That sort of thing. And so that is completely different than taking the result that you maybe didn't want so much, it's in the not so much box, and being able to look at it and say, okay, so how is it that this is going to take me to something equal or greater? Rather than, oh my goodness, I suck. And that's kind of the place that a lot of people go. Manifesting, it's not about hoping that you can convince yourself of something. People have told me that. Or forcing your thoughts to be different, or pushing away your feelings to force an outcome. This is not so much magical thinking, although it could be considered magical thinking, as sort of too one-dimensional thinking. Because it might work for some when the energy is already unconsciously in alignment, but that's it. The energy is already unconsciously in alignment. There's already subconscious beliefs, and it's a lot easier to move yourself into that state because it's about the energy of your consciousness, not necessarily your conscious mind. In fact, again, your conscious mind, it's only like 5%, so not really your conscious mind. You're going to find a lot more wisdom and capacity in your heart than you ever will in your intellectual mind. The doubts and fears you want to get rid of, they're actually subconscious resistance. So changing the inner energy isn't about getting rid of your emotional experience. It's not about pushing them away. In fact, because resistance is energy, right? Your thoughts and your emotions, they're energy. Your emotions are energy in motion. The more you try to push away the thoughts and push away the emotions, the more resistance builds. Like if you think of the resistance and the force that you create when you dam the flow of water, the energy is the same. And so resistance, it isn't to get rid of. It's not, right, something you're pushing away. It's part of you that developed as a protection pattern by your subconscious. It was a survival strategy at some point. And so something out of your conscious awareness, and there's a part of you that's perceiving a threat. within what you want to create or what you have. Anyway, so it wants something, just like the conscious part of you wants something. But what it wants is related to approval, safety and security, control. And so that's why it's coming up. It's not coming up to be pushed back into the darkness. The more you push it away, the more persistent it gets. And so make no mistake, it's showing up in your life. And you're probably mostly, if not totally unaware, of how it's expressing. It's the mind's tricky ability to be able to keep things hidden that you want to deny to yourself. But either way, you're not necessarily looking at what's actually there, because that would require you to break apart the way that you think about yourself. And so sometimes what happens is when what we think about ourselves, in fact, not sometimes, always, what happens is when what we think about ourselves, our subconscious comfort zone, is incongruent with something in our life, we are going to not manifest it into our life, or we're going to push it out. So you don't need to control the thoughts and feelings. They just reflect something deeper. You need to start seeing them as the window to look deeply within. You cannot master self if you do not see yourself. And so often bringing them together, integrating them, is a lot more helpful than trying to just change your thoughts or just like stop feeling those feelings. Because there's an inner turmoil that's happening that needs to be resolved. And so in one respect, I might tend to agree that there can be a touch of magical thinking in the idea that if I just thought different things, I could control the circumstances around me. Because we don't just change our thoughts and persistent fears when they're surfacing constantly. If I can just think something different and get a different result, and it's pretty easy and I'm not like looping, then sure, no problem. But when we find that we're like struggling with thoughts and it's coming back again and it's coming back again, it's because you have a point of resistance here. And I say that it's magical thinking with no judgment because I super tried to do this for a whole decade, not recognizing my own resistance in a specific area. And that was really how I began to expand my understanding of like, oh, I see how this works. And it doesn't mean that sometimes I don't fall flat on my face. It just means that usually I'm creating something I've never created before. And so you should expect that. If you're creating something you've never created before, chances are pretty good that you're going to need to kind of see all the ways that that's incongruent with who you've been. Anyway, and so again, it's not, I don't say this because you can't shift your state of being at the level of your thoughts. A lot of people can. There are certain areas of my life I absolutely can, and certain areas of my life, oh, heck no. And so it gets easier, though, as you train your brain to process the world in a different way than the way that you were conditioned to, right? To change the way that you see and experience the world, and and sort of to process and your results differently, and the meanings that you make around them. And as I said at the start, based on the lack of bridge to show you another angle, I suspect your therapist may have kind of subscribe or may subscribe. Yeah, I'll order my new tongue next week. To more traditional ways of seeing the world, sort of more in alignment with the idea of like, this is how it is, and you have to think realistically. And to be honest, the idea of like you have to think realistically can really box people in. Because, you know, if someone said to Elon Musk, you're going to need to start thinking more realistically.